Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. All in the wrong order here, I know, but wherever you are, have a wonderful day. I hope that you are having a wonderful day. And my name is Fernando Casarotti. I'm a second year UVA Darwin student, and I'm here today with the GMAT Club to bring you all another video that can help you in your GMAT journey. So, before we introduce our experts that we have today, Anurag, you all just remember to subscribe our channel, to like the video. That helps us a lot. So, with that said, hello, Anurag. How are you? Thank you so much for being here.
No worries. Yep, going good.
Eh,
Just 6 a.m. here, but happy to help out.
we were just talking about that, right? So, you are right now in New Zealand, Anurag.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
right?
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, nice.
all
So
the way in the bottom of
it's
the world.
Oh my God. And it's 6 a.m. of the 13th or 14th now.
It's 14th here, so we're just clocking in on Sunday at the
Oh
moment.
my
Yeah.
God. Exactly. For me, right now, it's 2 p.m. on
Oh yeah,
13th. So actually, I'm here in
yeah.
Brazil, as we
Oh yeah.
were saying before.
Uh-huh.
So came here to spend winter break with family and stuff. So we
Oh
are, we
yeah.
are just like a few hours apart. Nothing that will bother.
We're just time traveling at the moment.
Exactly. And thank you so much, Anurag, once again for being here. And I bet we're going to have a lot of people asking questions. Please, you all from the audience, feel free to ask Anurag whatever you want. And it's an opportunity to really learn a little bit more about your journey, about how you had such a successful journey throughout your GMAT preparation. And thank you so much once again for everyone watching. I can see that we have a great number of people here. So let's go into it. And if you would like to, first of all, Anurag, make a quick introduction of yourself, where you come from, where you are, why you decided to embark in this MBA journey, it would be great.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. I think I'll just take a few steps back. So I'm originally from India, and my father had a transferable job, and so owing to that, we've been in different countries like several different parts of India, Switzerland, and then now finally New Zealand, where I finished my tertiary education. So I graduated as a structural engineer from the University of Auckland, and then I think while I was graduating at university, there's like a lot of flexibility, right? And so you want to sort of explore outside of your major concentration. And so I did dabble into a little bit of case competitions and things like that, which sort of provided that exposure out of pure play engineering. And I did have in the back of my mind that yes, business is something that could be potentially explored as a future career path. But I think regardless, after 4 years of engineering, I thought there's so much blood, sweat, and tears that went into this. I'll definitely give it a shot in the industry and see how it goes. So I worked as a structural engineer here at an engineering design consultancy based out in Australia. And after that, I guess within the company as well, some of the opportunities that sort of cropped up, they were kind of business and strategy and crossover with innovation in general. And so I was like, actually, you know what? I think I've seen a little bit of what structural design involves and just the engineering design in general has to offer. And it's very exciting from a technical standpoint. But something that really speaks to me, or I think I get really excited by, is the more business and the more pure play strategy elements of it. And so I just wanted to internally rotate to a different team that could offer me a bit more exposure in that space. And then around this time again, my family actually shifted over to the UK, and so there was another factor where it was like, okay, I do want to eventually change disciplines and also by extension move towards somewhere in Europe, or at least in the northern hemisphere because this is like sort of so far removed. But don't get me wrong, like New Zealand's like an amazing place to live, have made amazing set of friends, and just I mean they've almost become my family as well. But it's just I think from a career perspective, I think a bit removed from the rest of the world, and so I wanted to be in the middle of it all and just get some more exposure early on. And so with all these various moving factors, I think I started looking into alternative pathways. And while the MBAs were always there, but they require like at least on average 3, 4, 5 years of experience. And so the next alternative was masters in management programs. And when I came across those, because those were purely targeted for people less than 2 years experience, I was like, okay, I'll give these a shot. But the problem was, um, I figured it out fairly late into the process, where I only had about 2 or 3 months to prepare for the GMAT if I wanted to target for round one. And at the time, I had an Indian passport. And so that was another sort of metric that went into it, is that usually it's an overrepresented target. And so I want to basically apply by round one to have like the best shot. And that's essentially when my GMAT prep began, because I saw, okay, GMAT's one of the requirements. But yeah, that's sort of the background, if you will.
Nice. No, that's amazing. Congrats for all the journey you have been through to get to this point. And it's great to hear about it. And something that I bet a lot of people are thinking right now, Anurag, is you had so many options. You could have taken the old GMAT, GMAT Focus, GRE, executive assessment, try to go for a waiver. So why did you pick exactly the GMAT Focus?
Yep. I guess in this, like to come to the GMAT focus, it'll be sort of a run through of the exact journey that I went through. So let me just go through that. And I think so. The journey essentially began last year, 2020. Sorry, 2020. Yeah, 2023. Um, I started preparing for the GMAT around, I think, June or July period, to target September deadlines, round one deadlines. And so at the time, there was only GMAT Classic. And I didn't sit the GRE because I looked at it and I sort of gave a mock test for each, the GMAT and the GRE, and I sort of aligned more with the GMAT. And so that's what I picked eventually. Although nowadays business schools are like, accept are being more accepting of the GRE anyway. So I prepared GMAT Classic using Magoosh, and to be very frank, I wasn't really too much aware or involved in any way with the GMAT Club forum. I think I did have an account, but I rarely used it at the time, like last year. And also, by extension, my knowledge was fairly limited. I just sort of Google searched and was on YouTube for a little bit just to see, okay, which course should I go for? And I looked at Magoosh was really good as a starter, and so I just sort of stick with Magoosh throughout my entire prep. And that's also because when I gave my first mock test, I had a 600 on the GMAT Classic, and Quant was fairly okay. The main sort of area that was lagging me down was sentence correction within verbal. Critical reasoning and reading comprehension were okay. Like I could basically salvage those two, but it was sentence correction that was my major sort of lagging factor, so to speak. And so because of that, when I was like sort of searching on Google that which is the best course to go for sentence correction, like one of the ones that came up were Magoosh. And so I was like, okay, cool, I'll just go with this. And I used that for all of the sections as well. So quant and everything in verbal as well. Um, the thing with Magoosh was, I think I'll recommend it as a starter. Like it's good for foundations if you have absolutely no background about the GMAT, because it will give you the tools that are the foundations for each of the sections. But I personally couldn't really use that to gain mastery. But having said that, I wouldn't pass on all the blame to them as well, because at the time I was fairly uninformed, and I only did around three mock exams going into the actual thing. And so there was a lot of underpreparedness in me as well, which I can very well understand in retrospect. But at the time it was like not really clear to me as to how should I efficiently structure my prep, and how much is enough prep for me to be having the best shot at giving the exam. So anyhow, I gave the mock test. After my baseline test, I had a 701 and 710 around 2 days before the actual thing. But then in the real exam, I had a 650. And once again, it was, I think my sentence correction score when I looked at the ESR wasn't too bad. But during the exam, it was a sentence correction that I kept second guessing myself, and it was a time sunk basically. Whereas sentence correction is supposed to be something that you get within 90 seconds or 60 seconds, and then save up time for the other bits. But for me, it was the reverse during the test. So anyhow, was definitely disappointed in myself with the 650 score, but with the lack of time, and again lack of guidance as well, I think, because I didn't really research as much as I probably should have, and I felt that applying early is more important than trying to push my GMAT score, which was, I think, a fair lapse in judgment, because perhaps pushing a GMAT score does have a more return on investment than applying early. Again, depends on a lot of other factors, but I think for me that was definitely the case. And so I just charged ahead with my application, and unsurprisingly, obviously, it's a holistic decision that they make based on your essays, and I think I could have definitely improved some areas of my essays as well. But I think, looking back, definitely GMAT must have been one of the biggest factors that held me back, and that was last year. So I was like, okay, that's cool. I probably still have another shot at applying to some of the business tools for next year's, the following year's intake. And then I definitely had the plan to sit the GMAT again. But for a couple of months, I think I just was on holiday, and then the application process itself also takes around a month or two. So by that time, it was already January, and I think around that time, I can't remember exactly when, but GMAC actually released that they're going to release GMAT Focus Edition, and they also detailed that it's not going to have any sentence correction, and that was basically Christmas came early for me, because I thought, okay, sentence correction was my biggest sort of drawback within that test, and they're getting rid of sentence correction. So without a doubt, I was like, okay, I'll wait for this, and I will basically give it my best shot when the GMAT Focus Edition comes out. And during this time as well, I think I started giving it a lot more of my energy, like the exam, a lot more of my energy and investment. And what I mean by that is I started going through YouTube, attending forums, like sort of interviews or debriefs, exactly like this one. And I'll touch on it shortly as to how much GMAT Club forum helped me. And yeah, I'll get to those bits shortly. But essentially, I started researching a lot more about the exam, what entails and what worked for other people. And um, anyways, but I couldn't really actually get into the thick of preparation because of a couple of reasons. One was obviously the official material wasn't released until quite late. I think July or August it was released. So I think roughly had around 2 months of prep again for this year, because I was preparing for other exams like the CFA, and also I was overseas for a couple of months as well in between. And anyhow, when I did come back, I had a clear sort of, obviously I didn't have to do the groundwork anymore. I knew what the structure was. It was just about um, gaining mastery in the sort of sections like quant and CR and RC for verbal. But there was this new section DI, which, to be very honest, during my 2 months of prep, I didn't really double down on, because the idea was that quant and verbal still form the foundations for DI. And so I would just focus on pushing my quant and verbal to the max, and then worry about DI later. And eventually, after the 2 months elapsed, I didn't really have time to look at it. And so I did post all my mock scores into my debrief, and then there you will spot that the DI score hasn't really moved much. And so I am sort of in the plan, like planning to potentially sit the GMAT again if I am going to apply for the MBAs instead of the Masters in Management programs. In which case, I'll definitely look to sit the GMAT Focus again and double down on DI now. Now that I've sort of, I think, covered quant and verbal. So anyhow, I think coming back, so in the 2 months that I did start the prep, I started as I was sort of looking through the YouTube debriefs that were posted by GMAT Club and also some of the other test prep companies. I looked at the names of the people who were sort of giving these debriefs, and I went on LinkedIn and then I reached out to them. And honestly, like, I think this was the best investment that I could have ever done, because more than paying for any kind of, I guess, course which are very structured and provide you guidance, these sort of informational interviews or coffee chats, if you will, that I sort of got to have by reaching out to these people on LinkedIn was just second to none, because I reached out to, I think, two people in particular who were extremely helpful. I linked those in my debrief as well, like linked to those particular debriefs and those particular people who were amazing. And they sort of actually walked me through what are the things that I should be thinking about. Like, for example, basic but very important things such as the error log, that if you're doing a question, just maintain a track, and if you're getting those questions wrong, have a note somewhere that says, okay, I've got it wrong for this reason. I was thinking that the answer was supposed to be this, but actually the answer is this, and this is the particular concept. And if there is a sort of pattern where you're like a particular sort of topic or a subtopic is your sort of source of mistakes, then just it's like an indication that you have to sort of go to that particular topic and then revisit it, the concepts once again. So outside of the error log, I think there were some other tips as well around like just how to approach studying itself. So earlier my understanding was quantities, like the more questions I practice the better I'll get. But actually, especially for verbal, this couldn't be further from the truth. In verbal, it's about, even if you do 5 questions a day over someone who's doing 50 questions a day, if you're able to analyze every single answer choice, why the GMAT put it there, because there's a reason, and then you'll be able to spot a pattern of those answer choices for any question for CR. Especially if you look at the answer choices, they sort of fall into a particular type of bracket. It's like, oh, they're trying, if it's an assumption question or if it's a weakener question, they will put a strengthener as one of the answer choices, and so on and so forth. And by extension, once you sort of, I guess, give the CR drills, just analyze the answer choices and why you put something incorrect and why the correct answer is actually correct. So it was all about quality, basically, like sort of re-entering that focus towards quality. That worked a lot, that paid a lot of dividends for verbal. And I think for quant, I tried to provide as many resources that I used that were extremely helpful in my debrief. So I wouldn't really go through them individually. So you can refer to my debrief. But I think the key there is that master quant, using those different sort of, I think, videos and articles, and also some of the GMAT Club math book that's provided by the GMAT Club forum moderators, like use those resources. But the key for quant is that it's a perishable skill. So one thing that definitely I fell like sort of prey to was, I thought quant I was really good at. And so last time when I was doing the GMAT classic, I didn't really brush up on con too much. I just sort of went through the content, practiced a few questions, and then all of my focus was on verbal. But in that 650 score, I think I got a Q46, or something around that score range, which I was definitely, I think it didn't really display my true potential within quant. I was getting, 49 50s in quant otherwise, and then it was a 46. And so quant's actually a perishable skill if you don't consistently practice it. So even if you're strong, doesn't matter if you have an extremely strong background. Like I had a scholarship in mathematics within New Zealand, and so it doesn't matter what your background is. You have to consistently practice it, and so that it sticks with you, I think. And so quant can be a little bit sneaky in that sense, that it, even if it's easy to you when you're learning the concepts, it could be perishable, as you're doing it. So you have to consistently sort of at least have, you have to find what your balance is: 10 questions a day, 5 questions a day, or 20 questions a day, but just keep at it every single day. But yeah, that's like the, I guess, high level. It was a bit, I hope it wasn't too much of a rambling, but yeah, that's kind of the overview of the GMAT Focus and why I picked it.
No, not at all. Anurag, thank you so much. It was an amazing summary. And from what I got, so would you say that the reason that really took you to choose the GMAT Focus was the fact that it didn't have the sentence correction part that was like being kind of something you were suffering with?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Mhm.
totally it. It was just sentence correction. I mean, the other changes like no geometry, or like the exam
Mhm.
shorter. Honestly, even if the exam was longer and they had a couple of new topics in quant, I still would have picked GMAT Focus because of them getting rid of sentence correction. So yeah, it's exactly that.
And would you have any kind of advice for people that are deciding right now? Because since the GMAT Focus is something really new, it doesn't have as much like as many mock tests, for example, as much material for you to try to get a mock beforehand. So, what would be the advice that you would give to people that are right now choosing between the old and gold GMAT or the GMAT Focus edition?
Yep, I'll say this. I think first of all, if anyone's wanting to get a taster, like say between GRE, GMAT Classic, or GMAT Focus, there's one free mock exam, official by the way. And anytime I mention mock exams, because I just saw Wirl's comment about whether they were all official or not. So they're all official mock exams. But I never took a unofficial mock exam like from any other test prep company, because again, I felt like I wanted something that was the most representative. And if I needed practice, I would go to the GMAT Club forums quiz, and then I'll use that. But I'll get into that in shortly. So to answer your question, I think to start off with, just give an official mock test for any of the tests that you're thinking to give, GRE, Classic, or GMAT Focus, and see how you go. For me, it was very clear right from the start that sentence correction was something that was a big drag for me. And so and I sort of went through 2 months of prep for that, because at the time there was no GMAT Focus. And so when the news came, I went for it. Now the second thing is, or the second concern, rightly so, is that there is not much practice material out there for it. Now this one I'll actually dispute, because while yes, you do have data insights as this new section, but the content is basically being replicated. It's kind of an old wine in a new bottle, in the sense that data insights is sort of IR, but with some new sorts of, I guess, elements mixed in. Like for example, data sufficiency could be is a bit more logic driven, and a lot less emphasis on pure maths or pure quant, so to speak. Unlike in classic, where just like as much as you expect maths to appear in quant, or I should say maths actually, like quantitative reasoning to appear in quant, you would have it in data sufficiency as well. But now data sufficiency, I think, lessened the amount of pure play quant concepts, and is more placing an emphasis on just pure logic, so to speak. So there are some differences there, but I think there is plenty of mock tests, which if you and I'm like cognizant of the fact that it is quite expensive, because they only provide you two free mock tests, which I think can take around up to 4 or 5 times before you start seeing significant amount of repeat questions. Again, I haven't tested this. I've sort of just read it in the GMAT Club forum. In one of the sub forums, they actually did the testing. So again, like the forum is full of legends, and so really have been harnessing the insights from everyone and the hard work that goes into it. But so there's only two. But I think if you are going to make an investment into studying the GMAT, more than say paying for any test prep company, first just get all the mocks that you can get. I think just allocate your budget like that, because that's like the best sort of source of material, especially for the GMAT Focus. And so I think in total you can get 6 mock tests, and from 3 to 6 mock tests, you can take those only 2 times each. And the first 2 mock tests, I think you could take around 4 times. So in total, you'll have around 12, 14 mocks that you can sit. So there's fairly decent amount of mocks that are available, right? Number one. Number two, quant is more or less exactly the same as it was in classic. So you can use the old GMAT OGs, or whatever prep material that you had from the past, and it's directly applicable to the GMAT Focus. Like I sat the Focus 2 times as well, and I guess we can get into that when we sort of dial a bit deeper into the journey itself. But I sat the GMAT Focus twice, and both of those occasions, and I gave all the 6 mock tests, especially the 3 to 6 mock tests twice. And I've seen pretty much, I've completed the OG, completed the guide, the quant guide, and in all those cases, the questions were, fairly transferable. I couldn't say that, ooh, Focus is doing quant a bit differently. I didn't feel so. Obviously, there's no geometry, but in terms of material available for quant, is exactly the same. Likewise, CR and RC for verbal, they as well are exactly the same. Like there is no change whatsoever. So that leaves only data insights. And I think within data insights, for me personally, the struggle was 2 parts analysis throughout the entire prep. But in terms of practice material, I think I didn't really practice as much as I could have. Like I couldn't finish the complete OG set of questions for DI. I only completed like I think half of the DI guide, the questions from the DI official guide. And so, yeah, because of that, I think my DI scores were kind of not as great as they were in like quant and verbal. So, but having said that, I think that might be a little bit falling behind compared to the other sections. But then again, you could practice questions from the IR, and a lot of the question types and the themes are sort of transferable. So, um, although yes, there is no strictly GMAT focus, OGs like 10 years worth of OGs to look at, but the previous year official guides are still very much applicable for the GMAT focus, especially for quant, and verbal, and also some of the sections of the DI, or most of it, I would say.
Nice. No, that sounds great. And it definitely answers the question. And the main caveat the main message that I get from that is basically if you don't know which one to take, go take a mock test and see
Yeah.
which one you do better. So then you can like put more effort into that,
hmm
right?
hmm
Amazing. And something that got the attention of many people, I believe, Anurag, was the fact that you use mainly 5 pillars for your preparation journey.
hmm
And just before we go into that, would like to remember to remind everyone to like our video, subscribe to our channel. It helps us a lot to keep producing this content. And going into the 5 pillars here that Anurag used to his preparation journey and that helped him to crack the GMAT were: one, study regularly. Two, build stamina. Three, use the GMAT Club resources and by extension LinkedIn, as you mentioned before. Four, avoid shortcuts. And five, well-being.
hmm
So going into one, studying regularly,
hmm
what did it take for you to find out the perfect, how can I say that, the how much you should study exactly,
hmm
like per day, per week, and when did you discover how much was enough for you?
Yeah, I'll take that question up, but just I spotted one of the comments. I think I'll just make a quick reference to that before we jump right into the
Feel
five
free,
um,
of course.
pillars. I think one of the questions was, the filtering is not available on the GMAT Club, and do we have to pay for it? I think um, I'll sort of bring this question out and generalize it a bit more, just paying for the GMAT in general and how expensive of a journey it could be, because I definitely bear the brunt of that as well. I think that's why I went quite hard on my debrief to try and provide every single resource that I found was worth its weight in gold, and it was free, and it provided comprehensive coverage of the concept. So, and it took me a lot of sort of reaching out to people on LinkedIn and also sort of watching YouTube videos and things like that. So there was a lot of effort involved, 100%, because otherwise it can be a very, very expensive journey. So in terms of the costs and trying to battle with costs, and sorry, Fernando, I'm not answering your question. I just think this was an important thing that sort of caught my eye, and so I
Yeah,
just wanted to
absolutely.
touch on
Yeah.
it. Mhm. Is basically starting out. I think if you have a set amount of budget, try and get as much official material as possible. So if you're setting the GMAT focus, prioritize your budget towards getting the official guide, getting the quant verbal DI guide, and then by extension, if you still have a bit of money left, then buy the official mocks. So I would say that's your prioritization. Now, after you do that, uh, then if you have a bit of money left, you can go for any external test prep providers or whatever have you. So that's my recommendation in terms of how you should spend your money. And once you have, I think, bought the guides and bought the mock test, now sure, yes, I don't have a stellar sort of 805 score to say that I demolished the GMAT with this, and so there's still a lot of room for improvement. But I genuinely believe that the content that's out there on YouTube, on GMAT Club forum, that it's more than sufficient to basically just absolutely ace the test. And from my end, from all of the articles and sort of YouTube seminars that I came across and I found tremendous value from, I have added them into my debrief. I wouldn't really go through them here because it's a bit of an exhaustive list, but that's why I tried to basically collate everything in one place. And the key idea there was that they're all free, all for free. And sort of the strategy, the overarching strategy, if you're trying to go through that route, which is not to pay for any external test prep provider, is you would have to create a structure around your prep. And so if you're going for sort of through the sort of free route of going through the articles and going through the playlist from say GMAT Ninja or various other people, then first I would say watch that video about that goes through that particular topic. So I guess if I take a step back, step one should be just go through the official guide, understand what the exam is about, and things like that. So if you're ever going to spend any single cent on the GMAT preparation, buy the official guide for the Focus Edition or whichever year that you're going to sit it at, and then just understand what the exam is about, understand what the concepts are, and then start going through each of those concepts in those free seminars or articles, whatever have you, right? And once you understand that concept, go to the GMAT Club forum quiz. Now that's what the question was kind of referring to, is that the sort of, I think, forum quiz is paid. I think yes, while it is paid, but I actually never paid for the forum quiz, and that was by actually being active on the forum itself. And so that's another thing I think, is that just be active on the forum and just answer other people's questions, and it doesn't even take that long. I think it took me 2 weeks of answering other people's questions and garnering enough kudos, and also asking my own questions. So if I had a question from the official guide that I didn't understand the official answer for, because, well, the official answer you will always understand, but the problem is it's so long-winded that you actually don't really you're unable to do it in 2 minutes with the solution that they propose. And so almost invariably there's a shortcut or a much more efficient way to solve those problems, and you can find those by sort of going into the forum. And so because the Focus Edition had a bunch of new problems as well, I mean, in the mock test, actually, I think the official guide they all are reusing from the GMAT Classic, but in the mock test, definitely, I think all of the questions were new, or at least most of them. And so, if I encountered a question, and if you do it the mock test, they actually don't give you the answers to it. So I was like, oh. Actually, how do you do this? I know I figured out a solution to this, but it took me 10 minutes to solve. And so, surely there's, a much quicker and a faster way. So, what I would do is I'll basically just ask that question on the GMAT Club forum. And because the Focus Edition questions are fairly new, it will garner a lot of kudos naturally, because obviously people are bookmarking it, and that counts as a kudos. And that then gets translated as points to your account. And so I gathered enough points that I actually never needed to pay for the forum quiz. But looking back again, talking about that budget and the prioritization schedule that I sort of mentioned, is like after you've bought all the official guide and the review guides for quant, DI, verbal, whatever have you, and the mock tests, then if you do have a little bit of spare cash left, spend that on the forum quiz. And again, like I'm saying, it's like, definitely I'm very, very empathetic to the fact that it can be feeling like, it's just, you're spending lots of money into this test. But there are some sort of ways that you can avoid this as well, and that's what I'm trying to share here. So with regards to the forum quiz, it's again exceptionally helpful tool that's been developed. And again, when people are charging for it, I think we also have to be sympathetic on the other end, that there was a lot of effort that went behind the scenes to put something together like that. And so, at least from a basic operational standpoint, if we want something, better and more flashier and more helpful in the future, there is some payment that is required. So I'm actually thinking that in my sort of next phase of my GMAT prep, even though I could probably get it for free, I think it is also to just to show a bit of support, that about how much the team sort of go through behind the scenes. But anyways, that's a separate point. But the main idea is using the forum quiz can be exceptionally helpful as well, because using that, I think you don't even really need to use or buy any of the old official guides. That's my opinion. Yes, it does not consist of the new official guide questions, because I don't think it does, like the one specific to Focus Edition. But you can control the filters of, like, whether you want purely official questions, or whether you want, like, non-official questions as well. And it's got extreme flexibility attached to it. And so what I used to do was, if I studied one topic, and I did the questions from the official guide for GMAT Focus Edition, I would then, for more practice, go to the forum quiz, and then basically filter from just that topic only. And in terms of the difficulty, I will start with around 600 or 600 to 650 level questions. So just around, medium level, and just gain my comfort, so to speak, in practicing those questions. And then once I was comfortable enough, I'll then bump it up to 700 or 750. One thing I did notice was the 800 plus questions. Like, they induce more stress than help. At least that was for me. For some of the cases, I could get them instantly, and that sort of gave me a dopamine boost. But I think for the most part, I didn't really personally benefit as much doing the 800 plus level questions from that bank. But definitely 700 to 750. I think if someone's targeting a 700 plus score, should push themselves up for that particular concept. Anyhow, I think that was a slight digression, but I think it was an important one regardless, because it can definitely be very taxing on the pockets when trying to prepare. But yeah, I tried to provide that guidance around that. Anyway, going back to your question, Fernando. So about the sort of five study sort of pillars, and the first one being studying regularly. Um, I think um, as I mentioned, studying regularly is key for the GMAT. Like it will, I don't think it will. I haven't seen a single GMAT debrief where someone said they sort of had, like they studied for one day and then took a week off and then studied again 12 hours and it worked for them. I haven't seen a single one. And like needless to say, even for myself, if I took a 3 day break in between, like say if I went for a mini road trip, or work was getting very busy, or whatever have you, I mentally, like physically felt that I was like a couple of days behind in my progress. And so GMAT is more about how frequent you sort of have your touch point with it. And even if on an extremely busy day, you just have 10 minutes, just say one or two questions from forum quiz, or just one or two questions that you're looking through the OG, even that goes a longer way, because there's something about just your mind being in it, sort of engrossed in it, that really helps. And so, like I mentioned earlier as well, that quant is a perishable skill. So definitely do a little bit of quant every day. Even if you're going through some of the weeks in your prep where you're just purely focusing on learning verbal, just continue doing quant on the side. I think that's the best way to do it, because quant is about practice, practice, practice. And then the second half of your question was around how did I sort of, I guess, structure my prep and fit it into my life in general, and work, and how did I figure out how many questions to do per day, and what was the optimal amount of questions per day. I think this one is really like an iterative process, because, and also because I work in design consultancy, workload is kind of like a sine curve, where it's like some days it's like extremely busy, some days it's not as busy because I'm in between projects, so we have submitted deliverables and we're waiting for client feedback. So point being, like no 2 days were the same. And so I think what I sort of made a commitment to myself in terms of the GMAT was that, okay, no matter what, no matter how busy I am, I'll at least at the very minimum try and dedicate 30 minutes of my time to this test. And in general, like I think on average, I dedicated around 2 hours. Like that was my optimum target. So even on an extremely busy day, if I'm coming back at 1 a.m., I'll try and do at least 30 minutes worth of just, five or six questions, sort of assorted questions, just to keep my mind in the loop. And otherwise, on a good day, it'll be around 2 to 3 hours every day. And during the weekends, I'll sort of ramp it up a little bit more, to around 4 or 5, because I'll just give one mock test and I'll sort of review it, and things like that. And so, because I had around 2 months of prep, and so my idea was that, okay, I'll give one mock test a week, and during the week, basically, I would just learn a concept, and then I will just practice the questions from the OG first, and then I'll go to the forum quiz and then start practicing those questions. And after my, I think, first GMAT Focus Edition prep, sorry, after my first GMAT Focus Edition test that I sat, and again, we could go into why the score was nowhere near as much we expected. It sort of ties in with one of the study pillars that comes at the end. But um, I was like, okay, I really need to track this. And so I had a spreadsheet, which I added a snip of in my debrief as well, to track, okay, how many questions I'm doing, what was the source. And they were all official sources, of course, but I just wanted to have that additional layer of tracking involved, so that it's not all in my head that, oh yes, I did about 15 questions of CR yesterday, or did I do 15 RC. It's like, instead of trying to have those thoughts in my head, I just had it all in a spreadsheet, so that I could see, okay, this week for the past 3 days I've been doing a lot of quant, and so I should probably focus on this other area now, and then practice from there, and things like that. So yeah, I did have a little bit spreadsheet to track, as well, to help me with that. But then whatever works for you, really. But the main key point is, I think, have a regular touch point with the GMAT, because doing every single day will go much further than trying to have like discrete days where you cram a lot, because that's not going to work. It might work for understanding the content, but it won't go a long way in terms of getting mastery over those content.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And since you mentioned, Anurag, how many hours, even like you said, if you can just touch base with the GMAT, would you say that keeping this routine is something, going to the second aspect of your prep, that helped you build stamina, or what strategies did you use for that?
Yep. So when I said building stamina, definitely like regular touch points is like the foundation, right? That helps you build a lot of the other things as well that come down from that follow on from it. But um, when I said building stamina, I sort of more was referring to the mental stamina, because oftentimes what used to happen at the start was I started studying for the GMAT, and let's say I'm doing like 700 level questions. After around 30 minutes or so, I would my focus wouldn't be as much. And I think a GMAT Focus, or even just a regular GMAT or any standardized exam for that matter, I think it is a test of focus, because you have to read the questions very carefully. And it's not that the test takers are trying to get you by slight changes in wording, but it's just that added element of challenge that you sort of need to develop and overcome. And so um, I think it was visibly like my accuracy was dropping beyond like the 30-minute mark whenever I was sort of giving a timed set of quizzes, like quiz drills. Like, say, I would give like 15 questions, and that's already 30 minutes. And so typically I would have around 20 questions or so assorted, like various, like a little bit of quant from the topics that I've recently studied, a little bit of CR, a little bit of RC, all mixed in using the quiz bank. And I'll just set it all in one go for like around 45 minutes or an hour. And when I like initially, like I said, past 30 minutes, my accuracy would just tank visibly. And again, thanks to Forum Quiz for that as well, that it's so detailed that you can actually really see how much time you took for a particular question, and they benchmark it against how much time did other people, like thousands of other people who did the same question, take, if they got correct and if they got incorrect, and all of that kind of analytics. I think it's really nice to have a really nice feel for where you're standing and amongst your peers. But anyway, coming back to this point of stamina, I think because going past 30 minutes was a challenge for me, I made it a point that regularly, whenever I sit for the GMAT, 95% of the days, obviously there will be some days when life just throws a brick at you and you just have to kind of just have that little bit of touch point and then move on. But 95% of the days, whenever I sat for for studying for the GMAT, I would sit for 2.5 hours undisturbed. Just like, okay, I'm sitting down now and I won't get out of my chair. I'll just do only GMAT. Obviously, beyond 30 minutes, I oftentimes had the urge to just check, say my phone or whatever it is. But just trying to sort of force myself to sit for 2.5 hours consistently help build that mental sort of stamina or strength, if you will, to sort of maintain that accuracy past the 30-minute point. And I visibly could sort of tangibly feel that, okay, yep, even going into an hour and a half mark, I still, my mind was fresh enough. And the reason I picked 2.5 hours was because the GMAT Focus is 2.5 hours, and so I was like, okay, I'll just practice as if I just sit for 2.5 hours. And again, depends on what kind of work you do. Like, if you do night shifts, then you'll have a different schedule. But for me, typically I used to sit those 2.5 hours around in I think in the evening, so after work is done, at the start. But then I found that actually, because my work was so taxing, at least from like a cognitive standpoint, especially when I was doing the structural pure play structural engineering stuff, because I was a graduate and so I had to learn a lot on the job as well. So by the end of the day, my mind didn't really have any capacity left to then do the GMAT at that same level of intensity. So then I actually changed it and did it at the start of the day, before I hit work. And so that worked for me. But again, whatever works for you in terms of the timeline. But I'll highly recommend that if you do want to build that stamina and ensure accuracy throughout, then just basically consistent studying is what will help. And yeah, just slowly extend your duration. So like maybe start by 30 minutes, then extend it to an hour, then extend it to an hour and a half, and so on and so forth. And so in my um, latest like sort of GMAT Focus test that I sat, the one for 645, I actually did two sections back to back, and then I finally took that break. And to be frank, I think I could have also not taken that break and still went for it. I think like from a mental standpoint, it's just about building that stamina. Yeah. Hmm.
Amazing. And indeed, that's so important, not only for your practice, but mainly for the real test day.
Hmm.
And just for the sake of timing, continuing to the other factors. And
Hmm.
if you're liking this video, please remember to like it, to subscribe our channel. It helps us a lot. And going to the next point, Anurag, you talked a little bit about that one, about third one, using GMAT Club resources and by extension LinkedIn. So,
Hmm.
is there anything else that you would like to touch upon that
Hmm.
specific point?
Hmm. Yep, sure. Yeah, I think we sort of touched on it, like some of the things like GMAT forum quiz, and all those sort of various elements that are baked into it. But just going a bit, like double clicking on this a bit more. When I say the GMAT Club forum, I think it's all comprehensive. So not just can it help you with understanding a concept or understanding a question that you got wrong. Because if you get a question wrong from the official source, just typing the first few sentences of it on Google, the question comes up, whether it be from the mock test or whether it be from any of the official guide questions. And by extension, any of the other test prep providers. Like when I was doing Magoosh, I could search a question on Magoosh and it will come up on the GMAT Club forum somewhere. So point is that any and every question that you can think of, I think, is pretty much covered in the forum. And so you can just go there. And the beauty of that forum is that there will be like 5 or 6 different approaches to a question for quant. And for CR and RC, you will have like, a couple of different ways to interpret the same thing. And that like allows the mind to build flexibility. Is like you're not stuck in that one way of thinking of trying to solve a question. When you look at these other approaches, you know I think my mind definitely started opening up. It's like, okay, cool, so I could actually apply the concept of weighted average for a percentage problem, or I can also apply it for a completely different topic like overlapping sets. I remember one of the questions that was solved by Bunuel, who's like the quant god in the forum. He sort of applied the weighted average technique in an overlapping sets problem, and I was like, oh my god, like how is this possible? But anyway, so that's one aspect of it, but it can offer so much more. Like for example, test prep strategies, experiences. And right now, as I'm in the process of like writing my essays for the business school applications, there's a whole sub threads and people like helping and exchanging ideas and the sort of sharing that journey together. And so I think at a personal level as well, it gives you that, I guess, feeling that okay, I am uh, part of a wider sort of community. Like, because oftentimes I think, especially for people who are working and having to schedule the GMAT within their calendars, social life can take a hit, especially if you're ramping up intensity. And so it could tend to become an individual affair for at least the couple of months that you dedicate to it, 1 or 2 or 3, however months you dedicate to it. And so I think just having that, for me personally, I guess that reassurance that I'm not the only one in this. Is it kind of help build that camaraderie going into it. So that's another thing. And um, why I mentioned LinkedIn was, if I saw someone who I derived immense insights and help from on the forum, or even by extension on YouTube, I would just search them on LinkedIn shamelessly, right? I would just go, "Hey, really, really derived a lot of value from what you shared over there. But I do have some targeted questions for you, and so if you would be willing to, just sort of connect my invite, and we could just have a chat together, something to that effect." And then granted, out of the 10 or 15 that I would send, I would probably get a response from around 5 or so. But and out of the 5, I think 2 conversations would be like brilliant. So it is, yes, like the ratio is like there's a lot of effort that goes into it to try and get that sort of return. But once you do find that person who is exceptionally helpful, it just goes a long way and it saves so much effort. And so the effort in this case is front loaded, and the return that you eventually get I can guarantee you is a lot more. And so LinkedIn is a very underrated rule, and not just for the GMAT. I think for careers in general, if anyone's looking for advice on transitioning, like I definitely hammered a lot of questions on to the people I reached out to about so I'm doing engineering, thinking of pivoting. Is that a good idea? What are you guys doing in your day to day and things like that? So it definitely helped me a lot to sort of bridge that, I guess, mental experience gap that I had. In any of the areas that I was curious about. So yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to mention, or that's what I mean when I say just utilize the forum that's available, and all of that is free. So, uh, you know,
No, yes, absolutely. And I can definitely say that coming into the MBA and transitioning as well to consulting right now, I use a lot of LinkedIn and it helped a bunch. Like I said, maybe you were going to have to try 15, 20, 30 people, but if you get one that's really going to help you, that's all it takes.
yeah.
So for the last 8 minutes, Anurag,
hmm
what would you say that you would really like to touch upon on avoiding shortcuts and well-being, the two last pillars that are as well very important?
Yep. So I think I'll touch on the avoiding shortcuts first, because yeah, like oftentimes when preparing and especially when the journey's tough, you try and look for, okay, what can I learn, or what can I sort of like do so that I don't need to go through this content, or I don't need to practice as many questions. But I think like that's the wrong mindset to go like or enter the exam with. Just have an understanding of what the concepts are and just go through each one of them, practice them. Obviously there will be concepts that will take you longer, and so spend a lot more time on those. But the point is that don't try and game the system where it's like, okay, there's only 10% questions expected from this particular topic, so I'll just skip this and I'll just focus on these other topics. Because the problem is the GMAT never gives you an exact percentage, it's always a range. And so especially with only 21 questions or so, in quant, or 23 questions. Like I think quant is 21. So if you have 21 questions in quant, and instead of say one, you get three questions from the same concept, then you're screwed, right? And so the point is, and especially it's an adaptive test, so you can't afford to sort of game the system, so to speak. Just spend as much time as you need. Don't rush the process. Just spend as much time as you need, concept by concept, and master those. And then at the end, like you would thank yourself, because especially now the exam, I think, is a lot more interconnected with DI being thrown into the mix. Quant is actually not just quant anymore. Like the skills that you learn in quant are very much applicable into data insights as well. And so that's already your two-thirds, of the exam. And likewise for verbal as well. Like the stuff that you learn in verbal, especially like reading I think critical reasoning, and being able to comprehend what the question is asking and things like that in a short amount of time, is also a very transferable skill into DI. So I think DI is almost like this section that rewards you for being fundamentally strong in quant and verbal. So that's what I sort of mean by take no shortcuts, just spend the time that's required. But having said so, also I'll just um, quickly mention that I think if someone is giving the GMAT, it's true that don't rush, but at the same time, don't give yourself overly comfortable timelines, like 1.5 years to prepare for it, or like I mean, if it takes 1.5 years, that's what it takes. That's cool. But going into the exam, I think if you have a fairly aggressive timeline, that might work in your benefit, in the sense that what I'm trying to get across is intensity really pays off, instead of just very low level effort engagement with the exam. That's just something that I want to also touch on. But yeah, I think the last point on well-being, I think it's the most crucial one that sort of brings everything together. Is in light of all these things that we've just talked about would be good to do, you can realize that it could feel quite a bit overwhelming as well. Like, okay, well, I should do it around 2.5 hours to 3 hours of prep every single day. And then on top of that, I should reach out to people on LinkedIn. I should be, engaging with the forum and all of that. And then it could feel like, oh my God, that's a lot of things to do. And to be very honest, when for me, it wasn't like always, from the get go that I was doing all of these things. These were things that I was picking up as I was going through the prep. And also, these were things that, because I was getting so much value out of, I wasn't doing it out of like, okay, I'm doing a GMAT. So it's like this discrete sort of, I guess, time of my day that I'm investing into GMAT. over the course of that period of my preparation, I actually started enjoying reaching out to people, talking with them, learning about their career paths. I actually enjoyed sort of, just writing an answer to a question, because that sort of meant that, okay, I'm actually understanding the concept now, and so I've derived so much help from other people, putting their answers in, so I'll put my answer in, and that also helped me sort of clarify my concept. So it kind of just integrated into my life, so to speak. It wasn't really this discrete chore. And I think that's also important, because otherwise, if each of these tasks feel like a chore, then that's basically going to be a recipe for burnout. So try and enjoy the exam, as as impossible as it may sound at the start. But you would, I think, start to sort of enjoy the prep, as you go on. And um, I think well-being. Why I mentioned this was because I think my sort of relationship, or the way I was approaching GMAT at the start, was a bit unhealthy, because I got the 650 score last year. And so this year, when I was sitting the GMAT Focus edition again, in my mind, I sort of had that apprehension that, what if I get a 650 again and I don't hit a 700? And not to say that 650 in the classic edition is a bad score. It definitely was above the average of a lot of business schools out there, but it was just like a self-imposed, so to speak, I guess, expectation that I had on myself, is like, no, I need to get above 700. And that, coupled with sort of, I think, a couple of other factors, like, okay, this is my sort of, only chance to sort of reunite with my family, or so get closer to them, and things like that, was like, it's just very unhealthy in general, right? And that sort of reflected on my performance on the actual sort of second time that I actually sat the exam. And so I think, before my third attempt and third and final attempt, I was like, okay, if I get the score, great. If I don't, that's also fine. But for now, I think I'm more than capable to already get like a 700 plus score. So I won't focus too much time into actually doing the questions, or lose too much hair over, like what would happen or what wouldn't happen, or what could go wrong, or any of those kind of things. I just sort of had my regular touch points, with the GMAT. So again, like, probably studied 2 hours, but it was just like, just doing the questions, and then sort of just enjoying life outside of it as well. Because earlier, and I think to a certain extent, this is like the catch 22 situation, right? It's like, you do want to have that work life balance, but at the same time, you do want to have an intense period of prep, so that it doesn't stretch out for longer than you want it to. So again, everyone will have that different, I guess, threshold of like, how many hours do they want to dedicate to the test going in, and then over time, how many hours do they want to ramp up, and things like that. But for me, how it worked was, because I was already, by this point in time, had 4 months of my life behind GMAT, I could very much afford to not spend any more incremental time towards the exam. And so I started basically just, going out for sports a bit more, or just talking with my friends, or just, going to restaurants, or whatever have you, just whatever unwinds you, basically. um, and paying attention to more to that. And that's why I think, in my like, first GMAT Focus attempt, um, the night before, the day before, and if you contrast that with my third GMAT Focus, the night before, the day before, radically different. Like, the first time around, I had done all official guide quant questions, and then, I also did, I think, a bunch of verbal questions as well towards the end. And I did the verbal questions thinking that it will calm me down, because I was like traditionally stronger in my verbal, because it was just a CR and RC, which was my strong suit. But because of, I think, all that stress, that was sort of that unhealthy stress, or self-imposed stress going into the attempt, and also because of doing so many questions in the morning, so many quant questions in the morning, my mind was just on overdrive, and I was just questioning even the basic, verbal
Mhm.
questions, like 600 level questions. And so, I couldn't even sleep that well. And so it was just a classic recipe for disaster. So when I sat the
Mhm.
test again, I was questioning every question, like, oh, is this the answer, or is that the answer, and things like that. And I think I did spot a question somewhere up, asking whether, how representative are the mocks, the official mocks, to the real exam. I would say they're extremely, extremely representative.
Mhm.
So definitely save those. And yeah, because I sat the Focus Edition 2 times now, and both times I felt like, yep, the mocks, like, it wasn't like the mocks was trying to lead me to a
Mhm.
different direction. It was very much aligned. And then the
Amazing.
final sort of sit that I gave, I think the day before on that attempt, I think I was just sort of watched a movie and yeah, just
Mhm.
really didn't do any prep as such, just except for I think 10 or
Yeah,
20 questions just to keep my mind sharp. But
just
that was
relax.
about it. Yeah, exactly.
No, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Anurag. And we sadly won't be able to take any more questions because of the time, but you all can find Anurag at the GMAT Club Forum. He participates a lot over there. Thank you so much once again, Anurag, not only for the video here, for your time. Once again, it's not 6 a.m. anymore, right? It's 7 a.m.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for sharing your expertise here with everyone. I'm sure it was very valuable. And if I can be helpful in any way to you, to anyone else as well watching here, please, you all let me know. Thank you, and hope to see you again in one of the MBAs around here soon.
Awesome. Just before we clock off, I think I'll say the same is that if anyone has any questions, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on the GMAT Club forum. And yeah, we'll be happy to help. But yeah, it was nice to meet you, Fernando.
You
And
too.
yeah, happy to see you all. Hope it was helpful.
Nice to meet you, Anurag. See you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.